Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, you have the third of my top 10 lists for 2023. And in this one, you have my contemporary reads with a splash of magical realism. Why did I save this one for last? Even though I'm a fantasy reader, it's because my number one book this year is in this category, and my number 3. In fact, most of the actual top 10, if we mix all the categories together, we're in this category, which completely surprises me. But when I think of 2023 and the books that were the best books I read all year, they're in this stack right in front of me. So without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at number 10 with a solid 9.0 is Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. I did not expect to enjoy this book. This is heartwarming. This is a book that has a touch of the magical realism and the fact that ghosts are sort of there and present and like speaking to individual people. And it's a found family aspect that deals with so many different people that all live together at this condo type apartment complex area in Florida, I believe. And it's just so heartwarming. I did not expect to love this as much as I do, but I did. And I just remembered it's in South Carolina, not Florida. Then we have another book coming in at 9.0, exactly on Compile, and it's my 9th favorite book, and it is a book that I read for the SESL Awards, and it completely took me by surprise, and that is Worst Case Colin by Rebecca Caprara. This book, I did not read the summary before going into it. I just knew it was on that list and I was going to get to it. In this story, it's told in verse, and that will also be a theme of some of the books listed that I have here. In this book, you have Colin, who his mom died a couple years ago, a year or two ago, and his dad has spiraled and is dealing with hoarding. And Colin is also dealing with the loss of his mom, but he also feels like he's losing his dad. I'm sort of getting emotional just thinking about how heartfelt and emotional this book made me feel while I was reading it. I did not expect it, so it completely took my breath away as I was getting into it. Every so often you have, I find amazing books on the SESL lists, and this is definitely one of them. This next one I have a copy of, and I'm really surprised. This is yet the second advanced reader copy that I purchased on Thrift Books. And yet it says Advanced Reader's Edition, not for sale. I didn't know it was an Advanced Reader's Edition going into it. But anyway, setting that aside, this also comes in at 9.0, and that is You Are Here, Connecting Flights, edited by Ellen O. This is a book that I read as an e-arc through NetGalley, and I did not expect this to be as much of a hit as it was. It's told by a lot of different Asian authors from a lot of different perspectives. Ellen O talks in her, I guess, editor's note, you'd call it, about the fact that people called her out on a previous compilation for including, I think, like only East Asian and not including some other parts of Asian identities, so different South Asian identities, Central Asian identities. And all of these stories, they weave together. They're not connected directly, but they all overlap, and they're at an airport. They're just phenomenal. And there's the one that made the biggest impact on me was from an author who I believe he said he is autistic himself, but it was describing the story of a dad and a son who are both autistic and how they are dealing with moving through the airport and doing different things. I think the mom had died. I don't remember that part of it, but it was just so sweet and heartwarming and emotional and eye-opening to see their story throughout this. And I just love how all of these stories ended up weaving together and all of the different perspectives that you got to see. Next, we have yet another hit from the YA SESL list. And the fact that I have, I think, 3 of the young adult books on my top 10, one of my top 10s from the year, says something. And that is Vinyl Moon by Mahogany L. Brown. This is very short. The audiobook is very short. It is told in verse and prose. And this is the story of a girl who had suffered domestic abuse in a dating relationship And her mom had taken the side of her abuser. And she had left, I think it was California, and gone to Brooklyn, where her uncle lives, her mom's brother, and was trying to start a new life, trying to separate from that situation and discover who she was outside of that relationship. It's not a story that's told a lot. And the way that she talks about both herself, the flaws of herself, the relationship that she was in, the strained relationship that she now has with her mother, how her uncle comes in and helps. These hard-hitting emotional stories, they work for me. And this one, hands down, was completely unexpected for me. Then we have probably a BookTube favorite, and one that my mom also read, and that we've also watched the adaptation that came out early this year and was the reason why I put this book on my list, and that is A Man Called Ove. This one, just like Vinyl Moon, scored 9.14 on Copwile. A Man Called Ove, sorry. It's translated from Swedish. And it is this man who has recently lost his wife. And he's very peculiar, persnickety, you could say, and he deals with a lot. And different people come into his life and disturb his order, and he's very put out by it, among other things. And you also get flashbacks to his life before. And it is so heartwarming, and it's a book that made me tear up, and the adaptation was done very well. So I highly recommend A Man Called Ove. Can't really tell you too much about it because that would spoil the story. That was number 6. Now we're into the top 5. And these are some of my best books of the year. And we have yet another SESL list book. All right, this one is Linked by Gordon Corman. I've read a Gordon Corman before, and it was fine. One I didn't really like. One was like, oh, okay. This one made an impact. And I wonder what it would be like to read it now after the start of the genocide on the Palestinian people carried out by Israel. But there's blatant anti-Semitism in this book, and that's what it's dealing with. There is a swastika found painted at the middle school. And there are various accusations, various things happen, who's at fault. There's all sorts of programs put in place at the school to teach why this is so wrong and what you can do instead. And also there's a movement where they want to bring everybody together to do something to overcome this hate and to support these people and to honor the victims of the Holocaust. And they decide to do paper chains, which is why you get this linked portion. And Gordon Corman did such a good job with this. I'm a little conflicted right now. Not because speaking out against anti-Semitism is wrong. That's wrong. Period. It's just hard to place this book, hard to talk about this book when the country of Israel, the political secular country of Israel, is inflicting such harm. These next two books, both tied for 3rd overall. They had the same score, and I really couldn't rate one above the other. They are both written in verse. I read both as ARCs and then got physical copies of. The first of those is Rain Rising. In this, there's some really difficult things that happen to these characters. I think there's death of a family member. There is, I don't even remember all of the difficult things that happen in here, but several of the characters in here deal with clinical depression and how that manifests in their lives. The main character is trying to put on a good face while also dealing with it herself. And it just is so emotional and so hard-hitting. I wish I had done a better job at summarizing my thoughts about these books before I got into them, because for some of these I read for way back in the year and the details are not as clear, but what is clear is how much of an emotional impact that it had on me. And tied with a Copwile score of 9.43 is Eis Explains It All. In this, she's dealing with the loss of her father. She lost her father in a car accident in which she was also present. So she has severe PTSD from this, and it is causing behavioral changes in her that people are not actually helping her with. They're punishing her for it. And she's having to work through the grief of losing her father, the trauma that was inflicted on her from being in this accident, and then the continual misunderstanding of her behaviors, of how, how she's acting because of this trauma that was inflicted on her. I definitely teared up several times with this book. Then we have my number 2 book in the contemporary category, and it is one that tied with Take My Hand with a 9.71 score. It is one that I finished and was ugly crying, and one that I was so excited when Fairy Loot decided to do another round of the special editions, and that is As the Lemon Trees Grow. Especially with the things that have happened since October, I think this is an incredibly important book to read. This is set in Syria, 2011-ish, I believe. So technically, could you call it historical fiction? I mean, technically, but I still consider it contemporary. And it's showing the life of civilians caught up in a war and being indiscriminately, devastatingly harmed. And I know for a fact that if this book hit me so hard reading it in July, I cannot imagine how I would respond to it emotionally if I were to reread it. I don't know that I could reread it right now with what's going on in the world and the devastation that is still being wrought on so many people groups, especially the Palestinians. Yes, is there a little bit of insta-love? Yes, a little bit. But the way that Zula Katouf deals with how the PTSD manifests in the main character. This is yet another book that I recommended to my mom. And when she got to one certain scene, she texted me and was like, oh my word. And I'm not going to tell you more about that, obviously, because that would be a big reveal. But that was a point where I was definitely crying. This is such a powerful book. I cannot recommend it strongly enough. It was beat out by only one book. My number 1 book this year. I have to look back at my video from last year, but I think this is 2 years in a row that this author has my number 1 book. Warrior Girl Unearthed by Angeline Boulley. And if I had to rate this against Firekeeper's Daughter, this one would win. I love that this is not a direct sequel. I love that it involves some of the same characters, that Donis gets to make another appearance. But the thing that impacted me so much was the subject matter of this book. Perry, the main character in here, for various reasons, she's not a super athlete. She's not exceptionally academic like her sister. She wasn't going to participate in this summer internship that her sister was participating, that others her age were participating in. She just wanted to get by. Something happens, she ends up having to participate in it. And through that, she ends up working with, and I wish I could remember his name, but he's the caretaker of the tribe's museum, basically, and cultural center. And he is, when he's working with her, they are trying to go through and find and reclaim pieces of their heritage, things that are incredibly important to them. And Perry is also incredibly motivated to bring back these cultural items, bring them back to who they belong. I got so emotionally involved in this because this is something that I'm so incredibly passionate about. Who gets to tell their story? Who should own these items? And it is something that I am increasingly motivated by the idea that the people whose story it is, those are their things. They should get those back. After I read this, you know what? I actually can't remember which came first, whether I read this first or whether I had my trip to the Mediterranean first. But it's something I've been thinking about. And I remember looking when we were visiting Athens and we were visiting the Museum of the Acropolis, where they have a lot of the statues and the reliefs and things that they brought inside to preserve. And they have these sections where they are these low relief sculptures where a lot of them were taken by a man named Elgin and brought to the British Museum, the Elgin marbles. And they have these sections where they show what's original, and then they have plaster to show what is now in other locations that is not their history. And I remember pointing that out to Mom as we were touring in that area, and I just thought that was so well done. and how they told that story, and just kind of like subtly jabbing at them like, can we have our history back? The way that so many of these tribes are treated, the way that they have to jump through 5 million hoops just to get back these basic items, and the way that others treat them so callously. It's hard for me to put into words just how much I resonated with a lot of the things that Angeline Boulley is talking about in here. And I don't say that I resonate with it because I'm Native. I do not have any Native American ancestry as far as I know and everything that I've seen. But as far as who gets to tell the story, the people themselves deserve to tell their story. And it is something that I have started to be passionate about the more that I've learned about my own history, about the Armenian genocide, about people gatekeeping who gets to tell about that and not tell about that. It's not their job to tell about that. Just starting to get emotional right there as I was talking about it. I remembered when I talked about this, when I first read this, just how heated I got in that review. I'll have to see if I can try to find that. But hands down, when I think of a book that I read this year that is my best book of the year, my mind, without a doubt, goes to this book. Angeline Boulley, you are an amazingly powerful author. I will, hands down, purchase every single book you ever write. And if you don't write anything again, that will be a travesty. But also I understand you will have left 2 masterpieces already. I hope you continue writing them. This is my #1 book of 2023. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.